second. We're making sure the AV is all set up. We're good? Perfect. Photo. Yes.
Thank you.
Well, on behalf of the entire Asian American group, my name is John Paris. I'm the chair of our endorsement committee, and I'd like to thank all of you for joining us this afternoon for our general election interviews. For those watching at home, the person that's seated to the furthest left is Harmony Leiteza, who's running for the seat in Justice Court 3. In the middle, we have Bennett Haron, who is the incumbent judge in Justice Court 7. And furthest to my right is Judge Janiece Marshall, who is the incumbent in Justice Court 3. Again, thank you ladies for joining us this afternoon. I will say this much. For purposes of the judicial, I'm a practicing attorney for people who who can't see me and don't know what I do for a living at home. But I regularly appear in front of Judge Bennett as well as Judge Marshall, although not as much anymore now that you've moved to civil temporarily. But I will be moderating the panel interviews, but I will not be participating in the actual discussions to avoid any appearance of impropriety. I just want to make that clear. I've said that before to both the incumbent judges here, and I think Harmony has heard me say that as well. So I just want to make that very clear. First question that we're asking everybody is the same for all of our races, and I believe both Harmony and Janiece have already answered it at our primary interview, but we'll start with it nonetheless. We'll start with Harmony. Why have you decided to run for this particular race at this particular time?
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you all, as always, and it's an honor to have the opportunity to be endorsed by this organization. My name is Harmony Leiteza, as you indicated, and I'm running for Las Vegas Justice Court in Department 3. I am currently a Chief Deputy Public Defender, where I've served for over 7 years, and I've always believed in serving our community. I believe as an attorney, the highest role of service is that of a judge. And so I always knew that one day I would run for judge, and this year I looked at the race and I studied the race very carefully to see who was up for re-election and what seats were open, and believed that the timing was right for me based on my experience, and decided to run for office this year.
Karen.
My name is Karen Bennett. I am the current judge in Department 7, Las Vegas Justice Court. And my decision to run for judge and seek re-election is the same as it's always been, and that is to continue serving the community. My professional background includes being general counsel of the Las Vegas Housing Authority, and just about my entire life, as well as my professional life, has been committed to serving the underserved and the poor of this community. Justice Court, I believe, needed at that time more diversity, particularly in the areas of professional background. My background was both in criminal and civil law. I thought that I could bring a different perspective, and I believe I have brought that. I've continued to serve the community while I've been serving on this bench. Justice Court is my favorite court in the whole wide world. It is the people's court, and it is the court where you can have the most impact upon people and hopefully help them lead more productive and engaging lives. And so that's always been a part of my life mission, and that's why I'm seeking re-election.
Thank you. Janiece.
谢谢你，我是马世坚，现在我法官在 Las Vegas. Good afternoon. My name is Janiece Marshall. I'm a judge in Las Vegas. I ran for Justice Court Department 3. In 2010, I ran for a couple of different reasons. One, I'm a very experienced trial attorney, jury trials and state and federal court. I'm licensed in California and Nevada before the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals and even in the U.S. Supreme Court. I handled a variety of cases throughout my years, 20 years practicing law, and was even a federal law clerk for 3 years before that. So I was very qualified to be a judge, and I think it's important that people do have a experience practicing as an attorney to be a judge, because it's important to understand what the attorneys are doing, also what the rights are of the individuals, and make sure that you are protecting the system and also protecting people's rights, and at the same time protecting me, it's very important that an attorney be experienced if they're going to be running for judge, and I had extensive experience. I also ran for this particular department because the incumbent had been convicted of domestic violence, and I think it's important as an attorney and as a judge that you are follow the ethical rules. As a lawyer, I've never had a complaint filed against me. I sit as a judge. I was appointed to the Nevada Judicial Commission after I was elected to the bench, and was just recently asked if I wanted to sit an additional term, which I agreed to. I sat on the standing committee for judicial ethics and campaign practices, and also volunteered for many years on the Southern Nevada Disciplinary Committee, because I think it's very important that attorney and judges are held to very high ethical standards. And that is something that I've strived for throughout my career, to make sure that I do that as an attorney and as a judge. So as a judge, I think it's important that you not only every day make sure you're doing your job, that you're prepared, that you're on time. I do all those things, and I also make sure that people understand in my courtroom what is happening, make sure that they understand, as opposed to merely their attorneys, because I went and watched, I've sat in many courtrooms over many years, and it's very sad to me when a person walks out of a courtroom and does not understand what happened in the proceeding that affected their life. So I make sure that I follow the rules that we're required to as a judge, make sure I canvass defendants when I ask them questions, make sure they understand what their rights are and what they're waiving, because it is very important. And I think when you're off the bench, it's very important as a judge to volunteer, to be involved in the community, to know what's important to the community and the concerns. And I have done that before as an attorney. When I first moved here to Las Vegas in 1992, I volunteered for Community Peace, which I think Judge Bennett volunteered as well. And since then, always volunteered. And then as a judge, I've made sure to keep myself involved in the community as well. And I work and volunteer on programs when I'm not on the bench to make sure that people understand the legal system and also help the community.
The topic of race relations has come up in this political cycle more so than it has in many previous ones. What, if anything, and we'll start with Janiece and go down the row, what, if anything, do you believe the judiciary can do to improve any perceived imbalances within the criminal justice system, looking through the lens of race relations?
Well, with respect to a judge, obviously you need to make sure that your decisions are based on with the acts of the individual, regardless what their race, their gender, which God they worship. It does not matter. Lady Justice is blind, and there's a reason for that. You want to make sure that everybody is treated fairly before the law. Now, judges do not make the discharging decision. So who is ever in our courtroom is there because the police officer has made a charging decision on a misdemeanor, and the district attorney's office has made a decision if it's a gross misdemeanor or a felony. So when you're a judge and you walk out on the bench, who's there is there. You can only decide the cases that are in front of you. So we have no role in who's charged and the crimes. We can only hear motions that are brought before us, motions to suppress. We can only hear what the evidence is before us. So to the extent we are blind as to that, and we should be. But that being said, as an individual, I go out and volunteer in the community because there is a clear problem that we have in the United States. And if you are a non-white male and you do not graduate from high school, you have a 60% chance being incarcerated. And you have a direct pipeline from our schools to our prison for that group of individuals. And that's wrong. And I have worked on projects to ensure that we reduce that number, that we give opportunities to everybody in the community, that whatever their socioeconomic, their race, their gender, whatever it is, that they're given that fair opportunity. So I've established the Heroes for Justice program to work with students, get them involved, and have positive points of contact with police officers as well as the legal system, so that there is interaction between the community and law enforcement, because we need to work on that relationship, and we need to work on it with respect to the legal system as well. So that's one thing that I actively do because I think it is so critical and so important, and it is a critical juncture, I think, in our society, that we acknowledge what is going on and what can be done to improve it. I also started a diversion program in my courtroom, and then also to the retailers for people who are stealing for theft. A lot of those people are people who can't get jobs. A lot of those people socioeconomic, Also, a lot of them are based on race. So there are things that we can actively do that I volunteer to try to improve the circumstances of the community. And it is our job as a judge, it's our job as citizens of this community.
Karen?
Could you repeat the question, please? I'm sorry.
More on the topic of race relations, and what, if anything, do you believe the judiciary can do to improve any perceived imbalances with respect to the criminal justice system?
Well, I think one of the things that we're currently looking at, and that I think courts around the country are looking at and have been for quite some time, are the pretrial release issues. Typically, people of color are the ones that are detained more often than those who are in the other classification. And that has to do with economic disparity, not necessarily race disparity, but economic disparity. And race and poverty sometimes are going hand in hand. And so there's an imbalance, quite frankly, in the way in which pretrial release decisions are made in our system. And I believe that we're working very hard to make certain that those kinds of factors are no longer obstacles. The other thing is something that people kind of use, I guess, generally, but I think it's very important. It's very important when you're selecting any person for office that you assess their cultural competency. What I notice and what I've been very saddened by as a sitting judge is to see the disconnection between the people who appear before me and the people who are either representing them or representing the state. Quite often there's a huge disconnection in terms of understanding culture, in terms of understanding decisions that are made that may end up being violations of the law, but also what motivated that. And I think it's critical to have that level of competency, because once you make a decision, particularly a sentencing decision in a low-level offense case, you need to be able to craft a decision that is going to hopefully reduce recidivism, not necessarily guarantee, but certainly take into consideration public safety, but also the resources that are available in our community that can be used to assist that person in not repeating that conduct. So, the one-size-fits-all mentality that I think was very pervasive maybe during the 80s, 70s, 80s, the law and order kind of mentality, I don't believe it works. And I think we're starting to see that. We're seeing that in the form of rates of incarceration, in the form of cost of incarceration, and in the form of recidivism rates that are unparalleled throughout this world. I mean, we have a higher incarceration rate than anybody else in the world, and we continue to have that. So obviously, there has to be some change. And I think with respect to the role of the judiciary, it's important that we become current and that we become culturally competent and that we attempt to develop sentences that are going to be effective.
Harmony.
So in my job as a Chief Deputy Public Defender, I represent indigent clients who cannot afford attorneys. And so the main place that I see this disparity in our system is with those clients that are indigent and they remain in custody waiting for either a plea or until they go to trial. And like Judge Bennett said, oftentimes race and poverty go hand in hand. And so there are individuals, I believe from my experience, that I can see sitting in custody that are minorities and remain in custody longer than their white counterparts do. I think right now what the court is doing with their risk assessment tool that's rolling out in these coming weeks is hopefully going to change that. And I know that Justice Hardesty has spent a great deal of time with the committee that he's put together and run a study from all over the country to make sure that that isn't the case. That just because you're poor, you're not staying in custody. And that money doesn't equal freedom, because that's not what our system is intended to do. But from my perspective and from where I'm sitting as a defense attorney representing poor people, that's what we see happen every single day. So the hope is that that new risk assessment tool is going to change that, but it remains to be seen. Certainly it just rolled out. It was supposed to start September 1st. It's a little bit late now. But I think that getting people out of custody so that they aren't forced to take a plea deal, because because right now, as it stands in the criminal courtroom, a lot of times people plead guilty so they can get out of custody. And many times they're not guilty, but they take a deal so that they can get out of custody. And that's not what our system is supposed to do. You don't plead guilty just so you can go home to your family, or so you can save your job, or so you can keep all of your belongings. And so getting people out of custody and making sure that low-level criminals that are coming back to court and that can prove to the court system that they have strong ties to the community and that they are going to ensure their appearance to court, can get out of custody awaiting trial, that's going to make changes with our system. Now, certainly that doesn't mean that everybody should just get out of custody and walk free, and there's a balance here to protecting our community, but also ensuring that people's lives aren't completely and 100% disrupted, because every single day someone sits in jail, their families aren't there with them, there's children without their mothers or without their fathers, and they're losing their jobs, and they're losing their roof over their head and every single belonging that they've ever had in their life. And I see it happen every single day, and that's the primary way that I can see from where I'm sitting that we can make a change in our system.
As someone who's been in and around the criminal justice system, as all three of you have been on, may be on both sides of the bench, you're all well aware that being a judge is not a 9-to-5 job. Assuming you are elected, and we'll start with Harmony and go down the row, what extrajudicial activities do you plan on engaging in to try and promote the judiciary, not only in the eyes of your constituents, for lack of a better term, but also to just to try and give back to the community in different ways than just sitting on the bench?
Well, I'm born and raised here in this community, so I believe very strongly in the safety and the well-being and in keeping our community as a great community. This is a great place to raise a family, but it needs to remain that way. And so I have been involved in our community since I was old enough to know the value of being involved, and my parents, at a young age, forcing me to be involved, and then me taking great pride in being involved in this community. The best thing I have told people when everybody asks how's the campaign going about running for judge or running for any public office is that you are out in every sector of this community, and you're meeting people who you wouldn't otherwise get to meet, and you're involved in organizations that are outside of our bubble of the regional justice system. There's a great need in this community, and there are wonderful people all over this community that want to ensure that this is a great place to live. And so it's important to remain engaged, to keep these conversations with the organizations going, because many people are unaware of what we do downtown, what our job entails, and it's important to keep the community engaged and keep these wonderful conversations with organizations like this who deeply care about our community, to make sure that we all are on the same page with what's going on here. As an attorney, I've gone, I think one thing that's kind of a nice program locally is going into schools with middle school kids who are sometimes in at-risk neighborhoods and talking to them about our criminal justice system. I think it's a fun way for them to learn about what's going on, and it's also important because they can see, if you do what you're supposed to do, you can end up in a great position and become a lawyer or a judge or a police officer or any sort of great individual in our community. But on the downside of it, if you don't, they have a front row seat of what could happen if they end up in our criminal justice system. So I think it's important to mentor youth especially, and hopefully hit them before they end up in our system.
Karen?
Well, I continue to do the work that I've been doing pretty much as long as I can remember. I'm a minister's daughter, so I've always been very involved in my church, and my church has always been very much a strong presence in the community, working with youth, working with seniors, working with people who live in public housing and subsidized housing. And one of the things, and going to schools, I mean, all of that is certainly very important. I will share this one story with you. After I was appointed as a Justice of the Peace, I was invited to go to career day at Kit Carson Elementary School. And Kit Carson is located in the historic West Side, Las Vegas. I don't like calling it at risk, so, because I grew up there too. So, but I went to Kit Carson, and I was in a 4th grade class, and I was expecting to talk about being a judge. You know, what it's like being a judge, what it's like being a lawyer, blah, blah, blah. And the first question that I get was from a young man who asked me, why couldn't his brother attend his birthday party? He had a birthday party in his backyard, and the brother could not go past the doorway because he was on house arrest. The second question was, does my brother's probation officer have the right to come and look in my room? So it was at that point that I realized that, there is definitely a different perspective with kids who have been exposed to the criminal justice system in ways that I wish that they hadn't, but they have. And they have a very negative view of it. And they don't see a lot of times that they have the option of participating in it in a positive way and in engaging in it in a positive way. So one of the things that I've done is I've partnered with Jack and Jill, which is a local civic organization, and the kids actually come to court. They are lawyers, they are judges, they are marshals, they are all of that, to know that they too have the option of being that they don't have to be on the other side of being talked to crazy or being abused, looked upon and being sad by their brother that can't go to their birthday party in the backyard. And also just talking to them and hearing that side, because I don't think we hear that very often. We always look at, well, that guy is bad and that guy did something wrong, and if you do the right thing, this won't happen to you. But that's not their reality. And a lot of times I have come to realize that kids particularly, they don't believe what you say unless they see what you do. And so for me, it's very important that you remain an example, that you remain present, that you just don't show up on special occasions, that you're there in and out of political season, that you are able to give them options, encourage their participation as they've gotten older now. I work with Nehemiah Ministries on the Black College Tour that's hosted every year. I work with Links Incorporated, and we service Rainbow Dreams Academy, Agassiz Prep, Booker Elementary, and it's important that you have an ongoing dialogue so that they start to see that there's another option available to them. I cannot stress that enough. I do the same thing in Marble Manor Public Housing with the women that are part of the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, where they face a different set of issues and a different set of challenges, some of which I don't know very well, but quite frankly, I'm willing to listen and to try and connect them with resources that can be effective. And so that's part of what I do after I get off the bench, and that's what I continue to do on or off the bench.
Janiece.
So I understand the question originally was, what do you do to pay back to the community as a judge and also just generally? So I think it's a very critical thing as a member of this community, whether you're a judge or a lawyer or anybody else. So I've always volunteered. I volunteer for example payback, which is go to a school each month and talk to them about why it's important they stay in school, get their education, stay out of trouble, to give children that understanding that they can be a judge, they can be a lawyer, they can be anything they want. Because of volunteering for payback, that's one of the reasons I set up the Heroes for Justice program, and I go to each level. Elementary school is a mock trial. 4th grade is when students begin to distrust the legal system, police officers. Career day at middle school, because Clark County has an incredibly high dropout rate starting at 7th grade, nearly 2%, which is extraordinarily high. 7th graders dropping out of school. So career day is an opportunity for professionals to go back in and explain how a lesson that child is learning that day with their teacher they use in their profession. So example, crime scene analyst measures angles, blood spatter, measurements. Real estate agents use numbers, tie it directly to math classes. One of the sergeants in CCDC is creating a lesson plan with respect on they don't use guns in CCDC, they have to use their body, and it's all leverage. It's all someone can weigh twice as much as you, but if you understand body mechanics, physics, science, that can be a profession that you can use. So it's tied directly so kids understand why their learning in school is important and how they can, if they stay in school and graduate, that they can use what they're learning today in a profession. So I have professionals lined up that go in to do that. We're at South Continuation academic center. They have middle school and high school students who are challenged. We are having the career day, and the high school student is a town hall meeting because people need to talk to each other, and students in high school are young adults. They need to understand when they come in contact with the police, when they come in contact with the legal system, what the expectations will be, what will happen if they behave one way versus another way, and why officers are doing what they're doing, and also to give the opportunity students to ask the officers questions. Why do you do this? So there's communication between the community and the legal system and law enforcement. That's the Heroes for Justice program that I created, and I gather people from all over the community to participate in it because I think it's really important. Children literally are the future, figuratively and literally, and that's what I have determined over the last 6 years that it's important that we focus on. I volunteer for the Boulder Highway Safety Coalition, which is pedestrian and traffic, because Las Vegas has such a high fatality rate for pedestrians. It's important to work throughout the community, not just on legal issues, but other issues that affect the community, people in the community. I attend the Asian Cultural Center regularly, the potlucks on Sunday nights, helped work with the Asian Cultural Center to have Metro come and speak once a month on issues that are important to the Asian community with respect to law enforcement. We have our next class this coming Tuesday. I volunteer for Sister Strong. It's empowerment of women. I work on zero fatalities, and because I'm a person, I think you can't just complain and say, oh, there's, we have all these problems. You actually have to do something about it. So my first year on the bench, in justice court, I worked both on the civil calendar for 2 years and a criminal calendar for 4 years. And so I see the interaction between the criminal and then evicting people. And so I started a Save the World program, and I brought different people from different parts of the community, and we actually work on different projects that we see. So we worked on reintegration housing, we worked on the jail population issues, we created the diversion program. We work on different things that affect the entire system and make positive changes by getting people in all parts of the system to work together. So that's what I do to pay back to the community, because I think it's important as a judge, as an attorney, and as just a citizen that lives here.
Kim, did you have any questions? Sometimes you do. I wanted to give you a chance because we're right at our time limit.
I got so much questions.
Okay, you can ask one. Anyone you want. No, not two. One. Anyone you want. And we'll start with Janiece and go down the road.
I know all you will say yes. Now, what about education? This is what my core belief, and this is being a father of 5, that my conclusion come to, and I would like to ask for your opinion that if you agree to. I believe the problem that we have in America across the board, especially in our neighborhood here, that is our children, grade school and under, they are not being taught with ethics and moral value. And that is what have been told by many teachers, that they have problems with third graders, what have you, of their attitude and et cetera, et cetera. Sooner or later you'll hear my chihuahuas in there. But do you agree with that? And because when they go to junior high, high school, and college, by that time you share the ethics with them. Like on the last panel, I asked about a lot of lawyers are crooks nowadays. That's because there's no value being taught. And so, again, my question is, do you agree that our children needs some form of moral and ethic value? And our Assembly Senate interview coming up soon. Throughout years now, all of them being said that the problem is with the family. It's parents' problem. And I said that's untrue, because parents' problem is 20%. Rest of it, 80% is society's problem. Because we are that child's society. And with that being said, do you agree with me with that? How children need that basic education in our public school?
So I agree with you. I think it's essential that we are all responsible for each other in our community. And we are at the bottom of education in the state of Nevada. And it is not enough to say that parents need to be better parents and teachers need to be better teachers. It is our responsibility as individuals to help each other out. And that's why I started the Heroes for Justice program, because people can go back and into the schools, elementary school, middle school, high school, and have interaction, positive interaction with students who perhaps don't have enough parental assistance in their life. We have lots of single moms. We have lots of even single dads these days. We have people that are working multiple jobs because whereas the economy, they've got their jobs back since 2008, but they've had to get multiple jobs. They're paid less money. They have chunks of their day where they're not home because they're trying to support their kids. We have other parents who can't, won't, unable to be parents. So that is the situation that we're in. And that is one of the reasons why I started my Save the World Committee, because we have to do something as a community. And it is incumbent upon us to accept responsibility. It does take a village. I was here for the grand opening for the Asia Cultural Center. There was a small child walking by when the performers were going, and I don't know who the parents were, but this little boy was disrupting the presentation. So I got up, invited him over, had him sit down next to a police officer, and he was extremely well behaved the rest of the program. There are principles that we grew up as children. If your parents have the time, have the energy, have the ability to help you with, and to the extent that a child is not learning from their parent or not accepting it, sometimes parents and kids don't get along, a third party can actually improve a situation. When you're in a grocery store and there's a kid throwing a tantrum, if you just talk to that kid, that parent is so grateful to you to just distract them for a moment, because the parent sometimes, can't get out of the role that the child and they have created. And that's why I think Heroes for Justice was one of the reasons why I created it, because I think it is important. And I also think there's untapped resources with seniors that can go back and volunteer in schools. My mom was a teacher for 43 years, both my sisters are teachers, and I talked to the Senior Coalition because I volunteer with them and asked them, would they be willing to go back into the schools and support my Heroes for program? And they're like, yes, we'd like to, because they have so much knowledge and wisdom that they can provide to a child whose parent may be working too hard to be able to spend the time with them. So I absolutely agree with you,
Thank you.
Kevin, that it's important and it's each of our responsibility.
Thank you. We commend you that go out of your way beside your regular job and having these pet program, and that's so important that we go out there. Thank you.
I think that children need nurturing. Children need to be loved, and I think at the end of the day, if we all just treated people the way we want to be treated, I think, the world would be a better place. Having said that, some of the behaviors that I think we see amongst our children, you have to dig a little deeper. It's easy to say they lack morals and they're, but there's a lot of anger, there's a lot of hurt, there's been a lot of betrayal. And so it's, I think, a response that requires a multi-level intervention, quite frankly. There are issues in the home quite often. You have to ask why. I mean, I think one of the things that a lot of people do, and particularly during this season when we're running for election, is we pontificate about all the things that we think should happen for those people, but we really have very little connection with those people. And we really don't understand how they live. And I think sometimes it's very important, first and foremost, to engage and see what it is that they say they need, because a lot of times our lives are very different. And so our expectations are different. And once we come together and you start to see and appreciate what's going on behind the curtain, then I think you can come up with some very plausible and doable solutions. But I don't believe that, you know, the finger pointing and the labeling is beneficial. I was born and raised in this community. My father raised me. He was a single parent, and I benefited immensely from so much that this community gave to me. People took, you know, I had 15 mothers and I don't know how many, everybody else. I mean, everybody's family, you know, and the fact that they took an interest in me and I know benefited me immensely. But they first had to know me. They first had to understand where I came from and how I was raised and what was going on with me in order to be able to be effective and for me to be able to respond to them. So I think that's really the first step. I think we, again, have a huge disconnection that needs to be healed between the have and the have-nots. And once that happens, and if there's a willingness, and then the distrust goes away, and eventually we're able to come up with solutions.
Thank you.
I mean, I think certainly this is a question I ask myself all the time. I'm a mother of a almost 2-year-old daughter. It's my first child, and so it's without question that kids need ethical and moral compasses. They need positive influences in their life, and they need individuals that are going to teach them these tools to grow up and be respectful, contributing members of our society. I think Judge Bennett makes a perfect point that we don't always understand what's going on, and once you look behind the curtain a little bit further, we're starting to understand more and more mental illness, and we're starting to understand addiction a lot more than ever, and kids are starting these things a lot younger than we all are used to seeing. And so you're seeing prescription drug addiction starting at home at a very young age, behavioral problems as a result of that, mental illness that people weren't really understanding, bless you, previously. Maybe they just thought, oh, you have a behavioral problem, or oh, there's something wrong with you and you're just a disruption, or you're a problem child. And now we're understanding that maybe these are people who have mental disabilities in some way or form. And so just to bring it back to our world in the court system, we're very fortunate that we have a court system that has specialty court programs where we can assist these individuals. And it's very surface. And it can only do so much, but it's a step in the right direction where we're taking individuals who otherwise would spend time just sitting in custody because they're problem children. And we're, 19, 20-year-olds, we're still talking about kids at some level. And they would otherwise sit in prison the rest of their life because they're problem children. But now we're understanding that these are individuals that have mental illnesses, and maybe we can help them, and maybe we can give them medication management so that they learn how to take their medication when they need to, and that they learn how to go to counseling when they need to, and addiction rehabilitation. And it's just very surface, and a lot of it starts with these individuals wanting to get the help. But it's a step in the right direction that our court system isn't just saying, the heck with you, we're going to send you to prison and you're somebody else's problem when you get out later in life. But we're looking at them and we're saying, how can we help you now so that you don't reoffend against our community? And I think that just to bring it back home to our court system, is something that we're all doing together as a criminal justice community to help those individuals, so that it's not just the 20% job of the parents, like you indicated.
Thank you. Just to share with you that you have a 2-year-old, did you know that your baby can learn 5 languages at the same time without being confused?
I was just told that the babies at that age are able to learn several languages. Yes, someone just gave me that fact, actually.
How many languages does your daughter speak?
Well, she was saying uno dos tres the other day, so I thought that was impressive. She can barely speak English, so we're getting there.
Baby steps.
Yes, baby steps. Exactly. But thank you.
We must share sometime in regarding to education. Been there, done that. See the problem that we have, and by the time all these kids that come to your court, it's already a problem towards your adult. And thank you for your service and your kindness in regarding to consider that, each individual cases. And really appreciate it. Thank you.
And ladies, we are at our time limit. Again, we appreciate your patience today. We appreciate you coming, taking time out of your busy Saturday to join us. Just so you know, we will be having, we will probably release our endorsements, I want to say the last week of this month. We'll be doing another set of interviews next weekend for various assembly races. Next Sunday, we will be having